Hey yo! So there's been a lot of debate and discussion under the comment section of my R&B Mount Rushmore video, mainly around this man and his lack of appearance on my R&B Mount Rushmore. As if I didn't state in the beginning of that same video that, now this is my R&B Mount Rushmore, which means whoever you want to put on and take off is your business. Now allow me to make this perfectly clear. This is the first, the last, and hopefully the only time that I'm ever going to talk about this man on my page. So I'm going to take this time now to give those who are closed-minded and don't want to hear what I have to say the opportunity to click out of this video. All right. For those of you who are actually still watching the video, that must mean that you actually want to hear what I have to say and you're into open dialogue and discussion. In real life, we'd get along great. So let me just explain why Robert isn't on my Mount Rushmore. As with the last video, this is all my opinion, but there are some objective facts to consider. You'll see. Now, I need to stress that once upon a time, before we all found out that he was a nasty man, I used to listen to Robert. Some of his songs were actually some of my favorites, like When a Woman's Fed Up, Step in the Name of Love, Bump and Grind, You Remind Me, Your Body's Calling. As a matter of fact, those were really the only songs that I liked by him. I am so dead ass. Hell, I even have camcorder footage of me and my first grade class singing The World's Greatest at our school concert, and I was given the solo at the end of the song. That performance was a canon event for me. It essentially got me over with a lot of people at my elementary school, so I'm not gonna act like there isn't an emotional or sentimental connection. And objectively speaking, yes, he was a talented artist. His talents made him iconic. But when I made my Mount Rushmore and I separated it into 4 different categories, well, 3 specifically, songwriting, producing, and vocalist, objectively, I didn't even consider him. And many in the comments were saying that Robert clears in all of those categories. But does he really? As far as the vocalist category goes, I, as well as many others, can think of 10 to 15 better vocalists than him. And that includes some of the names that I mentioned in the video. And as far as the songwriter and producer categories go, listen, I can understand why a lot of people would feel the need to put him in either one of those slots because he has written joints for a lot of artists. But relative to the names that I presented in my video, what separates them from Robert is that they have written and produced more genre and artist defining work than Robert. Put it to you this way, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis defined much of Janet Jackson's career. Babyface defines much of 1990s R&B. Like, to say that Robert deserves a spot over someone like even Teddy Riley makes no sense to me. Teddy Riley invented a sound that even Robert tried his hand at. You know, when he bursted onto the scene with Teddy Riley's sound and Aaron Hall's entire style, but I digress. Jermaine Dupri, Rodney Jerkins, Brian Michael Cox, who I forgot to say in the last video, have all individually created a slew of songs that undeniably are essential for the genre of R&B and the artists that they've worked with. Google is very free. So who can you point to and say that their careers would have been different without Robert, that Robert defined their career? Remember that line of questioning as we continue with this video, because upon review of his production credits, the answer is not as many as you think. It's like, yeah, he's written and produced for a lot of artists, and a lot of people make it seem like the work that he's done for other artists is genre defining work, but most of these songs, a lot of people wouldn't even put on their R&B playlist. Let's keep it all the way a buck. Even when I made this video, a lot of people in the comments were acting like he makes or breaks the genre of R&B. But let me break it down a bit, excluding remixes and features and only using some of the biggest examples. He wrote 2 top 10 hits for Changing Faces. That's good for Changing Faces. I have no argument against that. He wrote 808 for Black, which peaked at number 8 on the Hot 100 and number 4 on the R&B chart. A top 10 hit for sure, but it really didn't do much for them. Their biggest hit was Bring It All to Me, which peaked at number 5 on the Hot 100. He wrote Fortunate for Maxwell, which is Maxwell's biggest hit, peaking at number 4 on the Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. That's good for Maxwell. However, while that song is a bigger hit commercially than Ascension, Ascension sold more and is widely considered his defining song. So if he didn't have Fortunate, he would have still had Ascension. He wrote Life for Casey and JoJo. That song went nowhere near their biggest hits. He wrote I Don't Want To by Toni Braxton, which peaked at number 19 on the Hot 100 and number 9 on the R&B chart. Impressive, but relative to the songs in the rest of her discography, it's nowhere near her biggest hits. She didn't need it, nor does it define her catalog. Look to her stuff with Babyface for that distinction, which is so funny to me because people really think that Robert is over Babyface. Get the f. He wrote Hell Yeah for Genuine. That song went nowhere near his biggest hits, but it did spawn the next hit Genuine would drop, so I gotta give that to Robert, I guess. He wrote More and More for Joe. That song went nowhere near his biggest hits. He wrote Clubbin' for Marcus Houston. Not only did that song go nowhere, but
I'm gonna leave that one alone.
If you know, you know. He wrote You Are Not Alone for Michael Jackson, which went number 1 on both the Hot 100 and the R&B chart, and it was Mike's last number 1 as a living artist. Now, I personally never liked this song, but personal feelings aside and just applying some context around it, Mike needed that number 1 during a time when the world was turning against him. His last number 1 prior to that that was Black or White in 1991. So while that can be considered a point for Robert,
it's Michael Jackson.
if you take that song away from Mike's discography, he still has 12 number ones and 27 top 10s. That song only defines a portion of Mike's career, but it's no Thriller, it's no Off the Wall, it's not even Dangerous. And that same argument can go for the Isley Brothers, who Robert also made songs for in the 90s and the 2000s. Busted, which charted at 112 on the Hot 100 and 35 on the R&B chart, and Contagious, which charted at number 19 on the Hot 100 and number 3 on the R&B chart. Now, maybe there's an argument somewhere that working with Robert benefited the Isley Brothers by reintroducing them to a newer audience with a newer sound at the time. But again, much like Michael Jackson, they were fixtures in music by this point. Up until the point they were working with Robert, they were still making music. And I'd also go as far as to argue that the Isley Brothers benefited more from artists sampling their music than they ever did working with Robert. Them working with Robert was really just a side quest. I can't see this as something to really say that Robert was truly instrumental in. He wrote and produced for B2K's biggest hit, Bump Bump Bump, which peaked at number 1 on the Hot 100, number 2 on the R&B chart. And just like You Are Not Alone, I also do not like this song, but putting my personal feelings aside for a second, I can honestly say that this song was instrumental in solidifying B2K as one of the biggest groups at the time. You can absolutely say that they benefited the most from working with Robert. So as you can see, everything that oh, not you again. I was getting to that. But we can't talk about Robert's impact on R&B without talking about Aaliyah. This is going to be a segue into my final point as to why I will never include Robert on any Mount Rushmore. Just a minute ago, I said that B2K benefited the most from working with Robert. And if you heard that, you probably said in your head, no, Aaliyah did. And I am inclined to disagree with you if you said that. Because here's the thing. Robert did write and produce Aaliyah's debut album. He is responsible for introducing the world to Aaliyah. But Timbaland, Missy Elliott, Key Beats, and Static Major took Aaliyah and gave her an iconic sound that defined the rest of her career and her life. She benefited more from working with them than working with Robert in more ways than just music. This is also another reason why I didn't even want to bring up Sparkle, who is also another artist that Robert wrote and produced for. Because what Aaliyah and Sparkle both have in common is the unfortunate caveat attached to their working relationship with Robert. At this point, I think you know where I'm going with this. We're all aware of this phenomena, this saying, separate the art from the artist. I'm aware of this type of compartmentalization, and I would like to present an argument that many people don't think about. The act of separating the art from the artist has so many different levels and degrees to it. I'm just going to use a few examples, so please hear me out. It is possible to separate the art from the artist for someone like Chris Brown because his music is not a reflection of the thing that we know that he did. It is not possible for Victor Silva, a convicted boy diddler whose most popular film franchise is about a predatory creature who preys on majority teenage boys. The point that I'm trying to make is that separating the art from the artist is a possibility just as long as the artist's art is not directly influenced or connected to their real life. And even then, there's also a layer of whether or not you as the consumer should choose to monetarily support them. Like if you don't want to monetarily support Chris Brown, but you still want to listen to his music, just illegally download them. So in Robert's case, let me ask you this question. How do you expect me to separate the art from the artist if the artist isn't separating the art from the artist? Because the fact of the matter is, no, there is no separation with him. He wrote a lot of sexually charged music that was directly inspired by his sexual deviancies. That debut album that he wrote and produced for Aaliyah, a woman that he allegedly victimized when she was underage, was called Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. He dubbed himself the Pied Piper of R&B, naming himself after the Pied Piper of Hamelin. You know, the guy who used to play the flute and lure children to a mountain and disappear with them. So if you ask me, no, I cannot rock with that. I can acknowledge that he was talented and that he's made some contributions to R&B music, but that's as far as it goes for me. I don't care for Ignition Remix. I don't care for I Believe I Can Fly. I don't care for I Wish. I don't care for Trapped in the Closet, which is really just the R&B version of every single Tyler Perry movie ever made. His music is not worth saving to me. I'm sorry. If you think it is, and if you want to support that, that's your business. Put him on your Mount Rushmore. I'm not going to stop you. And if I don't want to include him on my R&B Mount Rushmore or any other conversation because I feel as though there are other names that have contributed more to R&B than he has, and that his real life transgressions in relation to his music that he himself made disqualifies him from any other conversation, that's my business. But at least we had a conversation about it. The only Robert that I'll continue to acknowledge in R&B is Brown.
But you know, I didn't make this video because I'm trying to change anyone's mind about anything.